Okay, I don't know if anybody's around or not today. Maybe. I don't even have anything to talk about. I just wanted to make sure that the live stream worked again. If you can see me, say yes. I am going to talk about one thing, just a hair. Hey, Java Man. Somebody shared something earlier with was a picture of the troll with her son, who was not much above toddler age in a stroller. She didn't do anything, Java Man. She just put up this thing. Somebody put up this old thing of her. Oh, thank you, Grants. I love my Grants. She put up this picture, somebody did, of her young son with a thing talking about how she can't wait to homeschool him. I know her all that time, and she never once talked to me about homeschooling in a positive tone. Hey, Prairie. Hey, Christine. Hey, Jean. I never heard one positive thing about homeschooling ever roll out of her mouth. Hey, Cheryl. I'm not opposed to homeschooling. I'm not even opposed to religious homeschooling. What I am opposed to is people who aren't up for the job homeschooling, which is a big difference. I had a lot of girlfriends that had college degrees or they were very smart people that homeschooled their kids at our old church, and their kids ended up getting scholarships to UVA at 16, that sort of thing. So I have friends that have done it really well or friends that have done it very, very poorly. Java Man, you're right. She couldn't be on the internet 16 to 18 hours. And yes, Prairie, it was an old picture someone shared of her with her son when he was like toddler age or maybe 3, saying she could not wait to homeschool. So I didn't really have any kind of agenda today, just that. I know a family that are homeschooling and the kids are way behind. Christine, that is more realistic, I think, than a lot of things. A lot of people are just not capable. I know I am not. It would have been a disaster had I done it. Does she know she can't homeschool while drunk? She's not going to do it. Odds are Toad is going to be the one that homeschools him. If Todd is educated, that might not be a bad choice. Might not be a bad choice. I could do it past the 3rd grade. I could do it too, I think, but I don't feel confident that I wouldn't skip some things. For a while, I taught art lessons to homeschoolers, and that was an interesting experience in and of itself. I had a heck of a time with some of the kids because of problems that I had never anticipated. I had one boy that was 8 that wasn't toilet trained. Let's just put it that way. And he seemed perfectly normal. I don't know if they ever managed to get him toilet trained or not. There was one child that destroyed every piece of equipment you used, and I started sitting him in the corner every time he did that. His mother went nuts on me. Did you see how homeschooling was portrayed in the movie Mean Girls? No, I didn't see the movie Mean Girls. How was it portrayed? I know somebody was supposed to homeschool their child in 3rd grade because no, it wasn't 3rd grade. What grade was that? 6th grade, because in our weird little county where we lived, elementary school was K through 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 were middle school, and then 10 through 12 was high school. Like you, I had friends that did a great job of homeschooling. Yeah. Cheryl, I've seen that too. Hey, and Naz, Redna, let them go during probation. Yeah, it was pretty crazy. If she does homeschooling, it'd be a disaster. Christine, she was talking about this when he was young, but I don't think she's going to anymore. LB is going to do her own deep dive indicator. I saw that. I can't wait to see that because I don't know what she's going to say. Good evening, Norway. Good afternoon from Costa Rica. Yesterday I painted my guest room in the bedroom in the cabina. I got most of it knocked out except around the ceiling. And all I've got to say is Getting expensive paint was well worth it because I only had to put one coat on everything. There were a couple places I may have to go through and touch up, but I did it. And it was a personal best for me because I was able to do this with my asthma wearing a respirator. So, hey Brooklyn, hey from Costa Rica to Florida. So, what do you think of the recent Meghan Markle nonsense? You mean where she was saying, I forgot what she was saying. I saw it, but I don't remember exactly what that was. Because Meghan Markle goes in one ear and straight out the other. This is a problem with people not part of the royal system intermarrying with royal. You get people who want to live their life in tabloids. You get people who think that the rules don't apply to them. I would not want to be in the royal family. I wouldn't want to have all my time taken up opening hospitals and crap. That would just be not for me. One group was at a spelling bee spelling xylocarp, and the other group was overtly religious people. I'm happily living as a Texan in the Netherlands. Yep. I have certainly thought about that myself. I've thought about moving to Europe. But in reality, if something ever happens to my husband, I probably will head to Baltimore because Johns Hopkins, I have doctors there. It'd be easier for me to be close to my doctors, close to my kids. So that's where I'm probably going to end up one of these days. I have a feeling. But who knows? Who knows what the future holds? But back to the homeschooling thing, it's one thing if you're homeschooling because there's a medical reason for the child. There's something else going on where the child must be away from everybody else. You'd recommend against the Ukraine? I actually have friends that are living there and they send dispatches about everything going on there. They're living in, I think it's, I want to say Kharkiv, but I know that's not the city they're in, but they're Kherson, that was it. Hey, Donald Brown. I want to move to Germany by homeschool and I refuse to send the kids to school. Brady, you'd have a rough time of it here too, because here, school. In fact, there was a big scandal here. Somebody I know that came here and started up a school. I know this lady pretty well. It came out last year that the school she founded, that she had got all those kids to go into, it's not certified. They don't have the ability to send kids to college, either here or in the States. It's not accredited. Her school's not accredited. And when she got busted about that, she moved to San Jose to open another school. So she's doing it all over again. So not only do you have to be careful about homeschooling and how you're going about it, what curriculum you're using, because that's another big thing. You have to really know what is normal development for kids. Like I said, when I was doing art lessons with homeschoolers, I saw a lot of inappropriate development going on. I mean, a lot of people behind in one area or another. Kids that couldn't follow any kind of directions, couldn't sit still, had never been a part of an official class before. It was not good for me or the children. I know of no one homeschooler here, and I'm not sure if it's a law or it's the thing here. I know some here, and it's illegal as hell. And Ontario, Canada, where I live, there are no rules for homeschooling. You can basically do what you want, and there are no curriculum rules. Christine, that's how it was in Virginia too. And like I said, I knew people who did it well and people who did it super poorly. One lady I knew, I was getting ready to say, her husband demanded she start homeschooling the kids once they reached middle school age. And the first time she did that, it didn't go real well. They had to hold the boy back a year when he went back to public school. So he ended up going there anyway. And the problem is the friend was saying, oh, they have all this curriculum about homosexuality, blah, 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 blah. And he's going to be exposed to this and that and the other thing. Well, he's going to be exposed to that anyway at some point. My thoughts on this subject is going to school is a rite of passage for the child. It represents their first steps into society outside the family unit. Java man, that's how I view it. And it doesn't really matter if you're using a public or a private school. The public school, your kid is going to be exposed to, the wide spectrum of everything. A private school, not so much. It's more insular, and you're going to get the same kind of people. I'm a retired teacher and love my job. I could never homeschool. It's hard. Love my grands. I think it would be hard. I think it would be. I think I could probably do it, but I wouldn't like it. I'd rather send my kids to school, be either public or private school. The thing that I worry about with homeschool is socialization, because we all know that learning to get along with other people is a social skill that you've got to develop at the right age. And if you don't, you never develop it. That is my concern still to this day about what's going on with various people's kids. There is a guest trainer telling teachers locally that only X% of kids are having SX. The kids need to be having more SX. Oh, that's kind of crazy. And you do have to push back sometimes on some of this stuff. We have lots of activities outside the home and with others. Prairie, I can see you doing that. I can't see other people doing that. And somebody that you and I both know, I can't see her ever doing that. 16 to 18 hours a day online. And who knows what the kid is being taught. My daughter teaches a lot of kids at our local junior college that are dual enrolled. And she said it is a joke. The kids can start at 13 and they're not prepared and can't write a paper. That is really bad. My daughter did the dual enrollment thing with our local community college. It doesn't work for everybody. And if you get some kids that can't write a paper, they can't defend an argument, it would be a problem. That would be too much even with me. Yeah, it would be. Dual enrollment, Java man, in our area, it was my daughter, who was in high school, who was enrolled in certain classes, was allowed to leave campus to take a couple classes at the local community college, where they had a program or classes that were college level, but like very basic beginner level. So she was able to pick up college credits for free through the dual enrollment thing. So we did it with her. We did not do it without my son, because my daughter is type A, go get it. My son is like me. It's kind of like just kind of fumbling around doing his thing without thinking about anything else like that. But at the same time, I took some classes at that same community college, and it was a good deal. I took language classes there, and I enjoyed the class and everything. But I'm just going to say this. When I went to school back in the Mesozoic era, the kind of things we had to do in language class were very different than what we had to do at community college and language class. It was more upon you. If you did not do the online crap, you were going to be way behind. Remember, she has a Spanish language degree. It is a ticket to everything. Man, we should be teaching basic. We should be teaching logical fallacies in 6 to 8. I like classical education ideas and also Charlotte Mason ideas. Oh, wow, your youngest is like this. Go get her. I believe there's a lot to be said for classical education. My son, not my husband, has gotten on to me and said, why didn't you homeschool us? Why didn't you use classical ideas and homeschool us? And it's like, well, because that's not my calling. And I didn't feel that this was something that I needed to do. I taught you what I knew behind the scenes. I don't know, Donald, I'm on the wrong side of 60 now. They don't teach cursive writing in my province anymore, and kids don't know how to sign their names and have trouble reading cursive text. Christine, that is one thing that I think we need to teach in schools that they've dropped is cursive, because you have to be able to sign your name. I mean, nobody uses it anymore. I use it. You should see my notebook. It's full of cursive scribbles of all sorts. Youngest was asking for school before she even opened her eyes this morning. Aw. They're not teaching cursive in Florida either. I remember back when I was in school, I think it was 3rd grade when we started doing cursive. And I remember struggling with it myself. It just was not intuitive like printing your letters were. Not teaching cursive and short-sighted. Cheryl, it really is, because you have to be able to sign your name. You've got to be able to sign your name on documents. And it is a quicker way to write than printing. So if you're taking notes and you don't have cursive, you can be slowed down quite a bit at all. So it's another thing that needs to be taught. So you're right. You're right, Prairie. It needs to be classical education on some level, some of the stuff. So I don't know what's going to happen with this world and the education, because the schools are not doing great jobs of it, I don't think, on that. Encrypted key cards. Ugh. I'll use cursive when I want to challenge those. Yeah. Oh, my word. My word. I'm trying to find my notes. I had written a bunch of stuff I'd been thinking about talking about, but I can't even figure out what some of this was I was writing about. Oh, I started looking into Calvinism. I haven't been a Calvinist ever, but I know a pile of them out there that have come up with crazy theology. And I think one of the things that I was looking at the other day that was freaking me out was their idea of predestination, meaning only the frozen chosen get to go to heaven or hell. Hey, back on my books. I'm over 70. We actually had classes in penmanship. So did we, Cheryl. The nuns labored with us to make sure that we had decent writing. And to this day, I have really crazy, loopy schoolgirl handwriting. I wish I had an elegant signature like my mother, but unfortunately I don't. There seemed to be a lot of predestination in the Harry Potter series, the Sorting Hat, wands, etc. Java Man, it is a theory that is really crept into a lot of things. And there's times I've looked at these Harry Potter books and wondered if J.K. Rowling was actually hitting upon some of these different religious themes. Not sure about the U.S., but here in Canada, they don't fail kids anymore. They just move them along whether they know the material or not. Christine, I'm not 100% sure about the States, but I'm pretty sure that's what they do. I don't know what they do here. I don't know well enough or not. But I do know here you have to have your child in a school that is accredited. And you have to be real careful because not every school here is accredited. One of the schools that I saw I wasn't real impressed with here was Waldorf. And I had never heard of Waldorf education before we got here. And then I started doing a lot of research on that too. Waldorf systems, no. Now, you used to be able to buy these Calvert systems educational material. I don't even know if they sell it anymore. And that was a pretty solid way of teaching your kids. My husband's brother was taught that way a couple of years when they were in Nigeria. Unfortunately, my husband went off to British boarding school in Nigeria and Lagos. And he's had some crazy tales to talk about living in a British boarding school system. My children were taught to print in Massachusetts where each letter had a tail on it. Then when they were taught cursive, they just joined the letters. Number one thing, and that's actually a really good way to do it. We were taught to do it, round, because as you can see, most of my writing is rounded. And I don't quite know how I picked that up. I guess that was at school. So Waldorf is held up as a gold standard, but I never bought it. I never bought it either. And being here where everything is all loosey-goosey anyway, and people will put their kale snorting essential oil, yoga, and rub on everything. They put it on that too on Waldorf. Waldorf is a school system. Let me see if I can pull up the page where I was looking at. And I'll Waldorf schools. Okay. Ooh, this is kind of interesting. You have a pile of schools listed here that teach Waldorf. Some of them I know of, some of them I don't. And the uncredited school I was talking about is listed as a Waldorf school, but I have no idea if they were using Waldorf education or not. I saw their curriculum at first, and wow, they've really pushed down any negative. That's interesting. The thing with Waldorf is it does seem to be about arts and art education and thinking and feeling. I taught adult ed for 7 years, and it shows when people were passing school without learning. Many were so intellectually lazy. That's what I thought when I was at the community college taking language courses. That's what I picked up on. I told the teacher once that those students are only cheating themselves. Exactly. They need to think twice about that. I'm all essential oils, and I was about them before they were cool things. However, fragrances trigger trauma in kids and adults. I have a problem with it because I am very allergic to the ones that are processed using benzene. I can tell you there's some that claim they're organic that are processed with benzene. So that's, for me, is a problem with that. So imagination and play is Waldorf early education classrooms. Waldorf schools has been around for quite a while, I think. It started in 1919. Started in Germany. This is very interesting. I'm not seeing any of the more moderate or disliking one. It's pretty crazy because the last time I researched Waldorf, a bunch of stuff popped up. And now all I'm seeing are puff pieces in all the major newspapers like the New York Times I was just looking at. Must be because it's fall. Parents at schools failed them. Now they agreed, but as they age, they fail themselves. That's exactly right. Maybe they could start a YouTube channel going after the Duggars. Oh my gosh. The Duggars, one of the big ones has benzene process. I swear they don't. But you can put the oil on my skin and I'll break out huge welts. Yeah, they're pretty much all over the world as far as I can tell with Waldorf. And it is, like I said, play and imagination. And play and imagination is important, sure enough, but that's not the most important thing when you're trying to teach the, reading and writing, arithmetic, the basics of life. So I think that's why I formed a negative opinion of them, because they weren't doing anything that was remotely like classical education. And my son is right about that. There's something to be said for classical education. So it's getting rid of that. So this education thing, we've all been thrown a wrench because of COVID. So one of the weird things, my daughter has questioned me out a bunch of times. She said, what would you have done if we were in school and COVID hit? And I had to tell her, it's like, I would have struggled to school you guys, but I would have done it, because what can you do when the world shuts down? You have to kind of do what they tell you to do. But at the same time, I know that troll has used the excuse to isolate that child. So there's that. You got to be somewhere between the extremes. The Simpsons, the principal said, back to the 3 R's. Superintendent says 2 R's in September. Yep. I really love the Simpsons. Sometimes they shine a light on some of the craziest aspects of our own culture and send it up. That they have shown some really bizarre things through the years too. So I've laughed at some of them. And some of the subtle humor. That's what my kids were telling me recently. They were like, we rewatch The Simpsons and now we get all the dirty jokes. And it's like, well, there you go. So I don't know if anybody has been watching this week the whole Todd Chrisley thing in KJ, because that's been very interesting to see play out. She has been screeching and carrying on about how she got a settlement. The settlement isn't really a settlement. It was against the two companies that had something to do with his podcast, where she tried to serve them and couldn't get the papers served. One or two of the podcasts where they mentioned her child would pull down, and at that point she was claiming she won this enormous victory over Todd Chrisley. No such thing. Now, did they have to pull that stuff down? As far as I know, they didn't, but I think they probably did, because if you listen to Todd Chrisley the other night on his video, he is struggling to forgive, to even come to the point where to even think about forgiving Katie Joy. Number one fan, yes, I believe he's going to get a new trial. When he was convicted, I was really shocked by that, because the person they had given the main amount of evidence against him was somebody that admitted to wrongdoing. To admit to wrongdoing, who was getting a free ride. I mean, you always have to look with a side eye at somebody who is tattling on others over something they themselves have done. I think there's a strong possibility that Todd and Julie will get new trials, or it'll be dropped altogether. The IRS sometimes can be very zealous in what they're doing, and they can get it wrong too. I've talked about that before. He is praying for her. I know he's not at the point where he can forgive her yet. And I told him, I said, that's okay. As long as you're open to the possibility in the future, that's perfectly fine. Because I've had to do that before with people, problematic people, situations of my life. It's like, I am never forgiving you. And then later it's like, well, I need to forgive you, but I don't feel like forgiving you. So Lord, soften my heart so that at one point I will pray for you and forgive you, because I'm not open to that right now. I had an aunt, what just made me crazy. She was constantly interfering in my life after my father died. Before that, my father used to just call her crazy behind her back, because she was so incredibly problematic and doing so many weird, wrong things. She was his sister, and he kept saying, I just don't get it. And she had mental problems. I'm convinced of it now. But according to her, nothing was wrong with her. It was everybody else. After my father died, she figured out how much money that he had left. She started trying to fight me over the will. And that became kind of a crazy fight. It took a lot of dollars to solve that. That's why I'm not a big fan of suing anybody or going into lawsuits, because it can cost a ton of money to fight somebody else in court. His attitude to her seems to have softened. Makes me wonder if there'll be a settlement instead of a court suit. I don't think there will be. I still think he's going to go after her as much as he can. I've learned forgiveness. It's for the person doing the forgiving. Many who are forgiven really don't care. No, they don't, Cheryl. They don't give a rat's ass if you forgive them or the whole world forgives them or anything else. They just don't. And it just kind of makes me laugh a little bit over this whole thing, because at first, when I had my falling out with that troll, I said the only thing I wanted was an apology. And she told me years later, a couple of years later, I've apologized to you many times. Girlfriend, I've never seen one apology, not one. Sadly, lawsuits are the only possible way she'll learn. Java man, I think that's what's going to happen. I think that 7M especially, I know they're not settling. I hope he does go after her. If it settles out of court, she'll be more emboldened. Christine, that's the problem with settling with her. And I'm hoping that they don't, because it was downright evil what she did to him on multiple platforms, starting with Pathos and then ending, with her own Facebook channel. Forgiveness doesn't mean no consequences. No, it does not. It does not. And it does not. And it doesn't do any good to have an apology go out there if the person you're apologizing to doesn't see it, which is my situation. If she apologized to me, it's nowhere that I've ever seen. So I don't know how this is all going to end up. I hope Todd doesn't settle. The last time I talked to him, he did not seem like he wanted to settle at all. He was just trying to find a way to forgive her, and is not there yet, as a lot of us are. I've forgiven her at various times, and then she's turned around and done stupid stuff. Like right now, she's talking about the same thing I was talking about the other day about Matthew Chandler. 3 days later, here she comes, Matthew Chandler, without anything before. So between that and Lori Alexander and some of the other things that she has done a couple days after me, I just think that is just tacky, while screaming that I am stalking her. I'm not doing her content. She's doing mine. Yeah, so yeah, you're right. Forgiveness doesn't mean no consequences. It also doesn't mean that you get over your hurt feelings either. With KJ, you miss this month's lawsuits. They're always next month's lawsuits. That's exactly right. And some of the stuff going on, I believe there's going to be more. I don't think we're even close to done yet. There's just too much other stuff going on that makes me think that she's going to pull another one. Hey, Laura. So I don't know how much of a chance Todd stands in winning. I know some of the law nerds have said that he stands very little chance of winning, but they're saying that 7M will win. One problem with forgiving someone who didn't ask for forgiveness is they're going to keep doing it. Java Man, that's absolutely true. And that's where my forgiveness towards her is gone. Is I know she's just going to keep on doing the same old. And every time I think I'm past forgiving her, something happens. Like one time I'd gone all the way to forgive her, and I talked to her even and said, hey, you owe me an apology, but I'm forgiving you. And then she started ranting about forgive me. I've apologized to you many times. Says, well, I've never heard one of your apologies. Right after that, and I was putting this all to bed, and I wasn't going to talk about her anymore, and I'd forgiven her, and I just locked her again after all of that. Was I saw where she copied my life story, and I was very, very upset. Carol, I did pull a number of videos. Do you know why? It had nothing to do with Katie or any of that. You know what it had to do with? It had to do with a crazy stalker I once had who sent me a cease and desist with a whole pile of stuff they wanted me to remove. I did remove some things. I removed some of the early videos. You have to understand, Carol, that when I first started I was at Pathos for a number of years, okay? I started doing YouTube a little bit because Pathos was pushing all of us to do alternate things besides just write. So I started doing this, and I had a lot of problems with the internet, just like I do now. So I had a lot of streams that didn't make any sense. They just cutting in and out. So I just removed a lot of those. And I removed some of the ones that the troll was asking, not that troll, but the stalker was asking for. So I removed a lot of things. You almost have to treat her as irrelevant. Absolutely have to treat her as irrelevant. Carol, what happened is I trained her at Pathos. She came on board. They introduced me to her and said, hey, if you have a question, you could ask Suzanne, you can ask Hemet, you can ask any of the guys working here. And she started talking to me. She started asking me 100,000 questions. She was the only person ever directed to me to help out that actually did that. Everybody else may have had one question or two, or said, hey, hi, good to meet you. See you later, and took off. Boom. Not her. She had constant. She had constant questions. And that one meeting changed her life forever. Exactly, Java Man, it did. So she had all these questions. She talked crap about leaders because she wasn't being praised. Sheila S., I don't even know who that is. So I was kind of her mentor. And she'd complain about everybody. And I'd say, yeah, well, there aren't many of us women writers, and we don't exactly get the accolades out there. So I just let a lot of what she was saying go in one ear and out the other because she was just venting, I thought. And when her son had to have open heart surgery, she talked to me all day long that day on Messenger. And I was kind of surprised because it was like, don't you have family and friends that you need to be talking to? But apparently not. So I didn't talk to her too much after she left Pathos. And when she left Pathos, it was under a cloud of badness. I'm kicking myself to this day that I did not save the correspondence she shared with me that she had with Phil Fox and others at Pathos, where she was extremely rude and cussing people out, and they were extremely rude and almost cussing her out. It was pretty crazy. So after she left Pathos, I didn't think about her much. Every now and then she'd pop up and we'd talk about the Duggars, or she'd pick my brain about Jill Rodriguez or something, and I didn't mind. But I shared with her stuff I knew about the Duggars that was not for publication. And I told her that when I shared that stuff to her. And the first thing she did was share it. So we started having those little, in November, right when, this was right around the time when Josh Duggar's car place got raided. We started talking. I shared with her. She shared with me. She used all the stuff that I'd shared with her on a video. I used some of her stuff in a written piece, and she went off on me. That was the first time we ever knocked heads. Now, there were times in the time that I knew her that I would block her at various times because I was just exhausted. I've said this before. I have mast cell activation syndrome, and I have real bad asthma. I've got all kinds of health problems going on before I started having strokes. So sometimes I wouldn't have the emotional energy to deal with her, and I would just block her, and she would invent a new name and come right back. Java Man, I saw that, and I'm glad for her. I'm glad that the procedure, because I saw pictures of her son before the procedure where he was turning blue. He obviously wasn't getting enough oxygen. She hates Survivor's Day in January. Yep, that's it. So after that point, we knocked heads. I blocked her again. It took her some months to come back. And then we started talking again. She said, oh, you have to come on my channel and we'll do a joint thing about the Duggars. And I said, okay, come up with a day, which I'd said to her 2 or 3 other times when she said the same thing. And she didn't come up with a day. Well, she came up with a day that time, a day and a time. And I remember it was early May we were talking. Carol, I'm really struggling to it was something that she put out that I loved her, but I didn't love her. I didn't even consider her much of a friend. I consider her like an acquaintance, like a work acquaintance friend. So we picked out a day, and I told her, I said, are we sure we're going to do this? Because my asthma's really bad right now. We were having the worst case of Sahara dust here. It was thick. You could see it on the mountains. So I asked her 2 or 3 times, are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure? And she said, yes. The day came, I double meted. I don't like to do that, but I will do it if I'm doing certain things. And I waited. I tried texting her again and again and again. She blocked me. And then she had the nerve to say she'd talked to me and we were all good and everything was perfect again, and that her and I were besties. I've yet to hear from her. That thing where she said that, she hadn't talked to me at all. Carol, I'm going to put a push on the next month to get this done. because I got like 5 chapters I'm kind of stuck on writing because it's kind of painful. One of which is about baptism. Yeah, I was I was really sick, Carol, that day. Really, really sick. And the thing is now, I'm not as sick from my asthma now because I started something differently at the beginning of the year. I gotta throw this out here. If anybody has chronic health conditions, you know what I started doing? I started medicating a lot sooner. Instead of waiting and waiting and waiting to see if it would go away, I'm like, boom, boom, boom. I hit it with medicine. It's more expensive, but hey, guess what? I'm not as sick. I painted the bedroom in the cabin yesterday, and I'm on here talking today. And I had a 2-hour phone conversation with my besties earlier today. So there we go. That was my history with KJ yet again. And since that moment, I have had nothing to do with her, except the one time when I tried to forgive her and say, hey, let's bury the hatchet. And she tried to bury it right in my skull. Nope. Oh, so yeah. So now I'm struggling to talk about baptism because baptism was something that was huge at our old church. Huge, huge, huge. And I think like the second or third year we were there, I took over baptism because we had a swimming pool and not everybody had a swimming pool in the congregation. Before they were doing the baptisms in a creek with glass in the bottom and stuff, and cows walking through, and it was just crazy. So after a couple times of enduring baptism in the creek, we said, look, why don't we do it in my pool? But the problem was I got roped into doing it every year. And there were some years where it wasn't appropriate. Like one year, my house flooded. My hot water heater came apart while I was on vacation. I came back, my house was sitting in like 2 inches of water. I still had to do baptism. I still had to do baptism. Running around with Surf Pro, picking up all my stuff. And oh God, it was a mess. It was a mess. And I still had to do baptism. The year I was so sick, I was almost in the hospital. I had to do baptism. The year I had a hysterectomy and I was definitely not fine. I had to do baptism. You do that medicating. It's like pain control. Do it before it hits the high level, as it will be easier to control and is to fight to get it a low level. Carol, that's exactly right. That's where I am now. I was thinking about the baptism story. So they have a solemn ceremony and then have a party in the same baptismal pot. Java man, I was struggling with that too because most of the people at our church did not have access to a swimming pool. So when I hosted baptism, they would do baptism and immediately would turn into this giant party, and everybody and their kids would be in our pool for hours and hours and hours and hours on end. And every towel of mine got wet. So it was a big thing for me because not only did I have to prepare and decorate and all that and clean, the aftermath was pretty terrible. Cleaning up after everybody, cleaning up right down to squeegee in the water back into the pool. It was just too much. And we had to shock the pool before and afterwards. It was a mess. So I finally, the last year or two before we left, I was laying on the sofa, the Hall of the Holy Garden. Oh my gosh. Java man, it makes about as much sense as a swimming pool that everybody's jumping and splashing in. So this whole thing, I finally ended it. I'm laying on the sofa right a couple of years before we left, and I'm looking up at the pastor, and he's like going, oh, this is wonderful, blah, blah, blah. I'm so glad you take care of this every year. And I said, I don't want to do this every damn year. You find somebody else. So-and-so has a pool. So-and-so has a pool. So-and-so has this. Find somebody else to do this. I've been hosting this for years now. It had gotten ridiculous to the point. And I kept having things happen that just interfered. So finally, I just told him off. I said, you tell your wife. I didn't exactly get along with the pastor's new wife. She was a pushy person. Let's just put it that way. Even though there were times it was like, oh crap, I don't want to go over there and help your ass, but I'm going to do it because I know that if I don't, that guilt will eat me alive. And as petty as I feel in this moment, I would be better off helping out. I cleaned their house when they moved. I've helped them move. It was just a bunch of stuff. It was sad because when other members would need help cleaning for whatever reason or moving or whatever, nobody ever showed up. Everybody showed up to lavage the pastor's rear end. It's like, oh, Pastor so-and-so, we're happy to help you move. It's like, well, can you help so-and-so move? No, I'm busy washing my hair forever, sort of thing. A lot of that went on. And there's stuff going on with my husband's church that I have to deal with too that actually fits with the book. So I'm writing a coda to it, like what next, what happens. I have realized something in the last couple of years. I'm a Methodist through and through. I'm methodical in how I like to approach all of that. I like order and decency. I like, yeah, that is another job for the Holy Garden Hose. I like when there's accountability, and I think that's why the Methodist Church is a good fit for me. And I was able to do worship there as well. Worship team. Not without some bumps, but there it was. So the nearest Methodist church is over an hour away. I don't know if I'm ever going to go there, if I'm ever going to make it there or not, but I know I'm not going back to the place where my husband goes because there's no guarantee of safety there for me. I stopped going to church when my kiddo was not really accepted. I do question organized religion. Laura, I question it too, because I think they get a lot of things wrong. Shelley, the painting went fabulous. I only got a little itchy throat from it. The face mask that I used, the respirator worked wonders. Now I know I can paint if I have to. We had a pastor whose wife demanded a new parsonage. Oh, Carol, that is so wrong. I haven't. With our pastor and his new wife, she had money that she had been saving for years, and they bought 2 houses. And then I'm losing both of them because the economic crash of 2009 put a hurting on them and everybody else. And when the church could no longer support the pastor in 2009, he left. He took his rear end elsewhere, and the only job he could get was working in a grocery store restocking the milk. And I can't think that would pay anything near what he was making as a pastor before. So both of those houses are gone now. And they were living in somebody's attic apartment for like a year or two and trying to regroup until they figured out what else they were going to do. It's a shame. You know, that's one thing I've said in my book is that there's all kinds of victims of church. And I almost say that they're victims too, but I don't want to go that far with them because I don't believe it of her. She's rather calculating. Tell her it's a great idea. The church would be happy to accept your generous donation of a new patronage. That is awesome. That would be an awesome thing to say to them, but not likely to ever come true. So that's what's really crazy about it. Now, the Methodist church I went through, they had a parsonage. It was women's view of the church even. And I never minded them living there at all, the pastor and his wife. I think it's important to have them close to the church because things are going to happen. And having that close of a place is a benefit. You know, several churches that had to sell their parsonages. Oh, man, that's because of the money. I come from a long line of Lutherans, even went to a private Lutheran university. Lutheranism is not something that I have much knowledge of. I was raised Catholic, Episcopal. My mother was Catholic. My father was Episcopal. I went to both churches as a child. Inside and out, knew them pretty well then. When my pastor gave me problems over filing for divorce, I said it was my last straw. And I'm not into organized religion at this point. And at my age, I don't see that changing, Cheryl. I think I'm almost there too. And it's kind of ironic because one of the things that went down towards the end of my time with the old Quiverful church is they told me to divorce my husband and stay. Divorce is evil, but divorce your husband and stay. And that's one of the crazy tales in there, along with the whole Pokemon thing and the kid that kept talking about Master You Know What and the time that they tried to do an exorcism on the stoned kid. Lutheran. I don't know much about Lutheranism beyond, Martin Luther and what he did. His 99 thesis, I think it was, that maybe it wasn't 99. The nailed to the door of the cathedral. That was one of the places I actually went, was where that happened at when I was living in Germany. We went all over the place then. Okay, you guys, I'm going to go. I'm rambling. I wanted to make sure that my my live stream capacity worked, because it hasn't been working well at all. So that's why I switched over to doing, whoops, I just broke my ring light. You were raised Lutheran, a lot of Lutherans here. A lot of Lutherans. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and go. It's one of those days. I'm not going to do much here, but I need to get off my butt and do some laundry. Love you guys. Take care.